This episode is brought to you by Netflix. This Monday night, witness the end of an era. John Cena takes center stage for his final appearance ever on Monday Night Raw. One last match, one unforgettable farewell. Come celebrate the legacy of a true WWE legend. Monday Night Raw, November 17th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time, only on Netflix. Be there for the moment everyone will be talking about.
Hey friends, this is Audie Cornish, host of CNN This Morning and The Assignment, and guess what? Every story you care about, every angle you want unpacked is now streaming on CNN. That means you can catch my show or other CNN programming whenever you want on your favorite device. And a subscription also gets you access to exclusive video series and unlimited articles. So subscribe to CNN at cnn.com/subscription.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Wrestling Draft.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Wrestling Draft. My name is David Hockney, and today I am not joined by Scott McLeod. You know, he had some excuse about, going to see his new baby nephew and all that, but what can you do, I suppose? But in all seriousness, no. Fellow draft alumni Ross McLeod has, and his wife Hayley, have given birth to their second child, and we here at the Wrestling Draft want to wish them all the best on their new arrival. Harrison McLeod, welcome to the world, and hopefully a future draftee. So Scott is obviously not here because he's off to visit his new baby nephew at this point. So we've brought in the next best thing. We've subbed on a fourth official here, somebody who's been co-hosting with me in the past, and I couldn't think of a better sub to bring on at this time of the season. Please welcome my guest co-host, Gary Morris. Gary, how are you?
I'm very well, David. Thank you once again for extending the invitation out to me to join yourselves here on the Wrestling Draft. It's always a pleasure, never a chore.
Well, you've proven to be a viable co-host when we needed you as a sub. So it's, and I don't imagine this time around is going to be any different. So let's continue the good work that we've done in the past. So we'll kick things off, obviously, with our top scorers of the week. And it is a four-way tie for first place. So there's been not a big scoring week, but quite a diverse bit of scoring nonetheless. So Chelsea Green, Kyle Fletcher, Stephanie Vicaire, and Thelka, I never know how to pronounce it properly, all on 7 points this week. Chelsea Green obviously becoming the new Women's United States champion for a second time. Kyle Fletcher defending the TNT title. Stephanie Vicaire defending the Women's World title against Raquel Rodriguez. And Thelka, I believe, wasn't paying much attention to Dynamite this week, but I think she picked up a win on Collision combined with a few appearances on Dynamite. So quite a good mix of female talent getting a lot of exposure, because when you look at some of the other 5-point scorers below that, we have Nia Jax, Marina Shafir, and Julia Hart both scoring 5 points. Nia Jax obviously making an impact with Lash Legend on WWE TV. Julia Hart obviously making an impact on Dynamite with the women's Blood and Guts match. And aside from Kyle Fletcher, the only other person to score big points is Cody Rhodes on 6 points, which I suppose is to be expected. Gary, what do you make of this diverse amount of scoring, particularly with a lot of eyes on the current female talent that both WWE and AEW have to offer?
It's difficult, and we've said this before on the show, is the WWE booking in particular is incredibly difficult to predict, because especially in which this has been a very, very long season, you'd feel now since Saturday night's main event, it's all going to be now starting to build up the build towards Survivor Series and War Games. So you're starting to probably see that the talent that's going to be involved in those War Games matches going to be featured pretty heavily now over the course of the next kind of couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the way the WWE pay-per-views, or premium live events, as they like to call them now, because they're not big cards, all the other kind of main title matches tend to revolve around SmackDown and Raw. So that's when you're starting to see things like the tag titles being looked at. You look at the defense last week with the Kabukis against Charlotte and Alexa. You look at obviously Chelsea beating Julia. So you're starting to see lots of the kind of B stories, so to speak, on TV, whereas the pay-per-views are obviously the big main event kind of level roster, and it's going to be interesting to see how they actually get to the two big War Games matches and what the rest of that card is going to look like in terms of the kind of the lower card of that big event. So it's really, really difficult to predict. And when you've got people like Cody that's going cross-show and being up on Raw, being on SmackDown, I benefited from that last season with Stephanie DeCare being both on NXT and on Raw. So if you can get someone that's on multiple shows in the same week, then you can really benefit from it. But finding that person that's going cross-show is quite challenging.
Yeah, and obviously AEW had the blood and guts matches this past week on Dynamite. I think that's going to be the last sort of major draw for them this season, because we've only got a couple of weeks left, and it looks like it's full steam ahead towards Survivor Series. You know, the women's War Games has got 4-a-side already planned out for that. You got the Kabukis, Nia Jax, and the recently called up Lash Legend going up against Rio and Charlotte and Alexa so far. So, I mean, usually the women's match tends to be 4-on-4, but yet for the men's side, we've only got 3-on-3 at the minute. Maybe they'll expand on that, but difficult to say really. But it's been a good week for Matt Smith in particular. Chelsea Green obviously becoming two-time women's United States champion. I think it's been long overdue. I think that's sort of kept him in contention, especially since Dominic Mysterio lost the Intercontinental title this past week on Raw. But we'll get to that in just a bit. But we'll see how the impact of Saturday night's main event and a few other shows have affected the scores. So still at the bottom of the table, unfortunately. Andy Mitchell, the man without beer, on 179. You know, his goal, he said he was going to try and beat me this season, but look where he's ended up. He's had a bit of a howler this time around. And someone else has had a howler, Gary Kernahan, Team Viscera, 183.5 points. Typically, you know, forever second place when it comes to Gary, but not this time around. He's had a bit of a stinker, especially with Becky Lynch making sporadic appearances. Then we have JP with El Grande Cos on 192. Scott McLeod, Yeet Dreams Are Made of These, breaking the 200-point barrier on 200 points. But then it's a bit of a gap. 22 points ahead of him is Grant McRobbie with AI No Better Than You. And then 5 points ahead of him, we have Dan Axel Jameson, the Essex Elite, on 227. 2 points ahead of him is myself with the West End Country Club on 229. Then as we break into the top half now, we have Matt Smith with Iguana Dance with Somebody, 236.5 points. I swear to God, if I don't beat that team with Mr. Iguana on it, I'm gonna backslap someone. Like, seriously, I'm gonna resort to, you know, angry phase after learning Shanty for the last couple of weeks. But anyway, I'm going off tangent here. But tell you who is doing a good solid season so far. Robert fucking Sean, the Draft Bastards, 248 points. Then we have, going into fifth, Lucas, 55 and counting, 256.5. 3 points ahead of him. It's yourself, Gary. It's Tsunami Time, 259.5. Pretty solid so far, but still a fair bit away from breaking into third place. So we have Tom Brock with I Promise I Don't Like the Other Brock Either, 271.5 points. So you're talking, a 12-point gap. It's still doable if the captaincy goes your way, but it seems like a bit of a stretch at this point. Then we have Stephen Wilson with Straight Edge Brutality on 284. And believe it or not, breaking the 300-point barrier, and God help us all, you know, a guy who can win the draft practically blindfolded at this point, or, you know, he could be cooking meals for others on Come Dine With Me and just let his team do the work. It's Team GOAT, the GOAT David Campbell, 301 points, and he's running away with it right now, thanks to the sudden surge in points from a certain Miss Vaquer, who I think Scott and I previously said, now that Stephanie's women's world champion, she's going to be the one to carry GOAT to potentially another record-breaking win here. Gary, with a couple of weeks to go, how do you think your standing is at the minute? Because we will go into your team in a bit more detail. And how do you think you performed overall?
I've done okay. I think Christian's been in at MIA now for a number of weeks, which probably hasn't helped in terms of a pot 6 pick, which was always a little bit of I think that there's certainly been better pot 6 picks elsewhere that have picked up a lot more points than what Christian has. So I've kind of been a 5-man team for a little while. What's helped, obviously, is that my tag team pick in round 1 of Braun and Braun has been very, very featured, obviously, on Raw. I still can't quite really understand why they haven't put the tag titles on them, especially given the fact that they're doing nothing on Raw with the team title. So that was, I felt they should have probably done that, and they've not. And Seth's injuries probably changed, I think, that the plans, a little bit for Braun and Bronson, I think, going into War Games. So that's been a bit of a misstep, really, the last kind of 2 or 3 weeks. It feels as if we're kind of treading water a little bit just now, rather than going into Survivor Series with a huge amount of momentum. Obviously, Tiffy losing her women's title was a bit of a blow. Drew has been featured but doesn't win very much. So I've had lots of people that have been in and around, but probably not quite enough of let's say, a juggernaut pick like someone like Ava Kerr, who just wins constantly every week. It's been, I think, if I finish 4th or finish top 5, given who I've picked this year and where I picked kind of mid-table, I think that's not a bad result, really, all things considered.
I think, now that the way the conversation's going, I think we could probably just dive straight into the team analysis. So you said Christian Cage is your MIA guy, but he's still scoring 20 points, though, which isn't bad for, what was he, I think, round 5, round 6?
He was a round 6 pick.
Yeah, round 6.
He's probably been on 20 points now for about 8 weeks, because he's not been on
ever since. Ever since Edge and Christian defeated FTR in Toronto, I think that was probably the difference maker for that instance. But you know what, for a round 6 pick, 20 points is actually quite good, to be fair. And when you look at some of the other picks, you're scoring at least 30 points for the rest of them. Between 30 and 40, you've got Jordan Grace, you've got Drew McIntyre, who I think has been ruled out for the rest of the season because he's, under the guise of suspension. He's off apparently filming a movie, so that rules him out for this season, or what's left of it at least. But then the Nick Aldis appearances alone, 36 points from just appearances. I think you can't really go wrong with that in that instance either. But you've ridden the Tiffy train practically this entire season, and I don't think you should be ashamed about Tiffy dropping the title at this stage to Jade Cargill, especially when you've had the captaincy on her for most of the season, because she has carried your team quite well. And then switching the captaincy to Braun Squared at the right time has obviously done wonders for you, especially with the direction things have taken. Even just appearances alone, they're the most heavily featured tag team on Raw at the minute, even though they don't participate in tag team matches that much. They're more standing out as solo guys. And that's probably where missing the trick is at that point. But what you've done quite cleverly is taken 2 big, strong performers as solo guys, as a tag team, and you've kind of deterred a few other people from getting big points. Was that part of your strategy, drafting those 2 together?
A little bit, but as I kind of mentioned, I firmly believe they were probably going to put the tag titles on them, because why wouldn't you? As a kind of big dominant team. And it's not as if the Raw tag titles are being heavily featured. But it seems that's been a bit of a misstep, because why would you not just put them on them and let them just run wild over the rest of that tag division, because they're not doing anything with it anyway. So that was part of the thinking, but they were always going to get lots of appearances, kind of Judgment Day style. But obviously without having a lot of matches together, which has probably been, I probably expected them probably to be in ring a bit more than what they probably have been. I've gained a lot of appearance points from them, but not a great deal of actual match points, or certainly pay-per-view match points, which will be the big difference between me and the guys that let Stephen and go at the top of the table, who their big top picks are all title winners that are winning on pay-per-views and getting double, treble points for those matches. I'm getting 1 or 2 points for my captain, and that's probably the 30 or 4 points I'm going to fall short.
Yeah, and was the thought process the same with Jordynne Grace? Do you think she was going to win a title at some point this season?
Potentially, yeah, but it's one of those where the title she's probably been closest to wouldn't have counted anyway in terms of the TNA title. So, although that may well change in future seasons, but again, fairly well featured. But Blake Monroe, Miraimi's kind of jumped ahead of her in the queue, and I'm still amazed that the NXT title still on Jacy Jayne. I think it's incredible.
Oh no, it's Tatum Paxley's the new NXT Women's Champion.
The vast majority of this season. Jacy Jayne, and I felt that given that Jordynne was probably the top face really on NXT, that was a move that made sense, but it didn't translate into actually what happened. So you win some, you lose some.
Yeah. Again, we've said with Jordynne Grace in the past, she's a slow burner at this point. It's just not a case of if she wins the title, it's more of a case of when. And maybe the thinking was she could have won the title this season, which isn't, an outlandish theory. But maybe you think, okay, maybe next season. I think it's just all about getting it the right timing when it comes to Jordynne Grace. But she will win a title eventually. I think there's no doubt about that. But other than that, I think it's safe to say, you've had a pretty solid season. You're currently in 4th place overall. You could still close that gap with if Braun Squared gets their way and, you get a few more appearances under your wing before Survivor Series. And I think with maybe top that off with maybe some Nick Aldis appearances, you could close the gap to 3rd place. But I think with Tom Brock's team, who's your closest contender, he's carrying the likes of Kyle Fletcher, Tony Storm, Hobbs Shibata, AJ Styles, Nia Jax, Aleister Black. Nia Jax obviously going to be featured in the Women's War Games match. Tony Storm was in the Blood and Guts match. Obviously, she lost, but Kyle Fletcher defending the TNT title, I think, is probably what's going to keep Tom Brock afloat at this point. So here's hoping you maintain 4th place going forward in this instance. But there's still one table we haven't addressed yet, and that is the Listeners' League table. And there's been quite an interesting development as we close into the last couple of weeks. So we actually have a solid tie for 5th place. So we have Tam McKinley with the Big Boss Tam and Gordon with I'm Not Too Fussed, both on 288.5 points, which is a very odd number to end up as. But when you look at their teams, you've got Tam McKinley with Charlotte and Bliss, CM Punk, LA Knight, Blake Monroe, Nick Aldis, and Chelsea Green, all of which scoring the minimum score is 35 points. And as we've talked about previously, and obviously Blake Monroe's the new Women's North American champion. Chelsea Green's got the United States title back. CM Punk's World Heavyweight champion. Charlotte and Bliss may have lost the women's tag titles, but they're also going to be featured in War Games, which is going to be good for him. So you never know. Don't count out Tam just yet. He might get a podium finish before you realise. Whilst Gordon, on the other hand, bit different. He's carrying Rhea Ripley, Jon Moxley, Mercedes Moné, Jimmy Uso, the Young Bucks, and Roman Reigns. Now, where I feel he's trailing a bit is probably the absence of Roman Reigns, and Rhea Ripley's obviously been off since the Tour of Japan, but she has come back and has been announced for War Games, which is a good sign for him. Mercedes Moné defending all the titles is probably going to be good for him as well, whereas Moxley, he may have lost the Blood and Guts match, but I'm curious to see where the Death Riders angle goes from here. So maybe Gordon isn't in the best position in the last couple of weeks. I'd say Tam is looking pretty strong at this point. So keep an eye on him for the time being.
Having those champions is going to help massively. I think obviously Chelsea, while she might not necessarily be on the Survivor Series pay-per-view, she's going to be at least on the SmackDown the night before the pay-per-view, probably defending that title against someone. So you would expect that to go quite well. Whether they carry on that angle with Julia, Kiana James potentially involved there as well, but you would expect her to probably retain out of that anyway. So and good on Chelsea, because I think she is someone who's always been a really good pick within the draft because
Oh yeah.
even outside of championship wins, she's always involved backstage and appearance points. So they're really kind of solid get, not necessarily in that maybe round one pick of female talent like a Becky or a Rhea, but actually Chelsea's probably more consistent in terms of being omnipresent as opposed to popping up in small wee pockets like Rhea or Becky have done this season.
Yeah, I think maybe they missed a trick with Chelsea quite a lot this season. You know, she's been a brilliant character, and her partnership with Ethan Page on NXT across both brands, I think, is going to just help boost those appearance points as well. So maybe a hot commodity for next season. But one other thing to note is that Tam is only 2.5 points. Yeah, 2.5 points behind Jonathan Napier, with still not over these Slim Jim tables on 291. So we could easily, reach fourth place. But third place might be a little bit more of a stretch, because third place we have Ross Brady with the big Ross man, 316.5, and just half a point ahead of him is Anthony Fitzpatrick with Include Impact Points 2.0 on 317. So we have a contest for second place here. But the story of the Listeners' League this season, he's been a day winner of the Listeners' League, and he could be closing in on his first Listeners' League win. It's Big Alan Laurie with Draft Balls 3, The Search for Draft Balls 2, 347. Now, we were a bit worried about the developments of his team, because his team contains Seth Rollins, John Moxley, Braun Squared, Sol Ruka, Nick Aldis, Chelsea Green. As we said before, Tam McKinley also carrying Nick Aldis and Chelsea Green on his side. But Seth Rollins has been the MVP of his season, along with Braun Squared as part of the division. John Moxley obviously carrying the AEW side of things, but obviously Rollins has been ruled out with injury for this season. Sol Ruka, although it looked like she's been written off with injury, it looks like she's made a bit of an early recovery at this point. So it looks like she could be bouncing back on NXT for the coming weeks, maybe even challenging Blake Monroe for the North American title yet again, although it remains to be seen what happens between her and Zarya for the coming weeks. So we could see, I think, as long as Big Alan Laurie keeps his momentum with Braun Squared going forward, and obviously the resurgence of Chelsea Green, he could potentially be on the right track to become the Listeners' League winner this season, especially with a 30-point gap. But we've seen crazier things happen in the draft before, so watch this space.
NXT as a show is really, really difficult to call because it's involved in so much in terms of over this season particularly. There's been obviously all the AAA stuff on there. You've had all the Impact TNA stuff on there as well. So they've not just been on TNA talent, on NXT talent. So some of the kind of big names in there that you would have expected to have done really, really well this season probably haven't. Someone like Trick Williams, for example, who's been on pretty much every show, but because he's been carrying a TNA title, you've probably not got the same amount of points for a Trick Williams and maybe they've got for an Obafemi, for example. So it's going to be really interesting to see what sort of NXT involvement is going to be on Saturday night's main event for John Cena's final event. Obviously, that'll fall into next season, but early next. But the fact that they're going to have some NXT talent in there might be a sign of maybe some of the NXT guys to look out for next year. But
yeah, definitely. I mean,
it's going to be a bit of a stab in the dark as to who those people are going to be. So,
well, Javon Evans, I believe, is the only NXT talent announced so far, and he's facing Gunther in round one. So, I mean, good luck to him. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets chopped out of the air and his chest gets caved in as a result. But I mean, he's still young. He's extremely talented, and I'm amazed he's not been drafted as part of this season, especially when Trick Williams has also gone undrafted. But the big standout performer of NXT this season is Ethan Page, 62 points overall, and I'm gutted that I didn't put the captaincy on him at the start. If I'd known he was going to go on this generational run of defending the NXT North American title, the guy's been an absolute, character as well as a solid performer. So yeah, he's been a great addition to NXT, and I imagine he's going to be drafted fairly highly next season as well. But Gary, one last thing I want to round off with this episode, and he's only got 3 dates, I should say, left on his WWE calendar, because he's got one more Raw to attend, Madison Square Garden. He's got Survivor Series, and then it's Saturday night's main event, and then we won't see him anymore. See what I did there? Yeah.
Yes.
We got to talk about Big Match John, or should we say Grand Slam Cena. So if you've been living under a rock the last couple of days, you'll see John Cena defeated Dominic Mysterio to win his first and only Intercontinental Championship. And that now makes him a Grand Slam champion with just 3 dates left on his retirement tour. Just to note, John Cena is undrafted this season, but he currently has 27.5 points according to the scoring. And that consists of 3 pay-per-view appearances, 10 TV appearances, 2 non-title pay-per-view wins, and 1 TV title win. So, and he's scoring higher than a lot of drafted folk this season. You know, he's scoring higher than Ricochet, who's part of my team. He's scoring higher than the Bucks, for crying out loud, a very popular tag team when it comes to the draft. He's scoring higher than the Wyatt Six, Bayley, the Hurt Syndicate, Julia, for God's sake, who's been Women's United States champion for best part of this season. And it's crazy to think, you know, that if he was drafted this season for old time's sake, it probably would be the only time we would have got to see how well he would have done as part of the retirement tour, because drafting him next season would just be pointless at this point.
Absolutely. And I think it was surprising that Cena stayed on the table, but yet Roman came off it, given that Roman doesn't ever stay around for too long. So the fact that Roman was taken and John wasn't, given that we knew John was probably going to be a bit more heavily featured, if not necessarily going to be on every show, but it struck me as a little bit. Now, I had John Cena last season, and my team didn't do brilliant for me, but it was a decent pick. I think I got him round 3, so that seemed about right. But yeah, it's one of those where I've never been the biggest John Cena fan in terms of his wrestling ability, but as a character, he will be a big miss, because he's someone that can always be relied upon. And you just got to look at that event in Australia a couple of weeks ago where the full stadium's covered in John Cena t-shirts. So
it was just a sea of green. Yeah,
they'll miss that merch fodder, especially given the fact that GSO has kind of calmed down a little bit recently as well. So they will have made an absolute fortune off this John Cena retirement.
Yeah. And you mentioned Roman Reigns as well. He's only on 14 points. So Cena's scored practically double what Roman Reigns has done. And we said before, once Roman has why was Roman drafted when he's going to do practically fuck all this season? And I think the point's been proven there. You know, you could have drafted John Cena for his retirement tour, and at least he had guaranteed dates to show up, most likely appearance points. But winning the Intercontinental title on his last Raw in Boston, you know, before possibly defending in Madison Square Garden, that I think is a really fine statement to have. This is the kind of booking he needed on his retirement tour, not the heel turn in hindsight, but it was pretty shocking nonetheless to see that happen.
Yeah, they just didn't follow up with anything, which was a shame. I think the actual turn was great, but then Dwayne got involved and the whole thing.
And Travis Scott got involved.
Yeah, and listen, they've lived and learned with it. They hit the reset button, and actually the last 6 months have probably been what it should have been all the way through anyway, in terms of putting over other talent. The AJ match, some people would have loved. It didn't do a great deal for me because it was 45 finishers, but some people would have really enjoyed it. So it's what John Cena will do. People that like John Cena will have enjoyed it. People that don't like him will have went, well, it's taken time on the card that could have been given to someone else that would rather see. And I'm actually looking forward to a WWE without John Cena that can maybe push proper guys at the top of the card, guys like guys like Dragunov, that I can actually sit and enjoy their output in terms of as a wrestler. But John Cena's not for me. He's for the kids. So I can't really complain too much, because I was a kid as well.
Yeah, no, I completely get that, you know, and it could be argued, you know, he was a bit of you know, sort of like the face of the corporation a little bit, a bit of a corporate product, especially when the PG era was brought in. And I get that. But what I also appreciate that is he's got an excellent work ethic. He's a fantastic human being. He's done a lot for Make-A-Wish, and he's also very outspoken about, maybe some of the less popular things about WWE these days. He's not afraid to speak his mind. And I think when he talks, people listen because, he was a big part of WWE for so long. And it was around when I first started watching WWE, that's when he started gaining traction on SmackDown as Dr. Thuganomics. So I'm going to be watching that Saturday night's main event very, very closely. And I might even, with a tear in my eye, salute Cena for an amazing 20 plus years in WWE and making a lot of our childhoods worth something. But we'll get...
It's going to be really interesting in terms of who he puts over on the way out, because it strikes me as obviously a guy who's for the business. So I don't think he's going to walk out with the title. So it's a case of, well, who's he going to put over on the way out? Is it going to be Dom again and give Dom that moment? And actually,
I'd like
to be the big story of the next draft night is, well, predicting that winner of the season tournament and getting in early and trying to get them on the board for the event. So interesting.
One last thing before we go, actually, just quick prediction. Who do you think's winning the Last Time Is Now tournament?
I would like it to be Gunther, just because I'm a big Gunther mark, and I think they fumbled the Goldberg retirement, but it's Goldberg, so that didn't really do too much. But I think I'd really quite enjoy seeing Gunther just slap John Cena about for 20 minutes. So I think that it would be the type of match I would do on WWE 2K24 or 25 or something like that, and just annihilate him with chops for 20 minutes. I would quite enjoy that.
Yeah, logical choice. If it was up to me, though, and I wanted to go different, I'd choose Sheamus.
I can get the theory behind that, because again, that's another Grand Slam, but I don't know if the story beyond that is that compelling with Sheamus. So
I think there's potential, given that Sheamus defeated Cena to win his first WWE title, so the history is there, and I think it would be great for Sheamus to win his first Intercontinental title by defeating the same guy he won his first WWE title from. I mean, the storytelling is there for the taking.
It's a full circle moment. And you know what? It could happen. I don't think it'll be either of them, though. I think it probably will be Dom again. And they'll strap the rocket on Dom. And it would be good, I think, for Dom, who's been brilliant again this year. And I think he's got future world champion written all over him. And I think next year could be the year for that. So I think it could be the start of what could be a very, very big year for Dom, who's been brilliant from a draft perspective and within Judgment Day. But I think next year could be the year of Dom on his own, especially as a proper babyface run. So, yeah. Dom's the logical pick, but Gunther's my Mark pick.
No, you know what? Stick with your Mark pick. We'll stick a pin in it for now. These are early predictions, but as we get closer to that Saturday night's main event, which will be next season, we can do a more accurate analysis of that. But in the meantime, that's going to do it for us here on this week's episode of the Wrestling Draft. Hope you enjoyed listening to our regular weekly analysis. If you want to catch all of our past content, be sure to follow us on Spotify, iTunes, Anchor, or whatever podcasting platform you prefer. You can follow us on socials at The Wrestling Draft, and get involved with the conversation, get involved with the Listeners League. If you want to take part, just drop us a message and we'll let you join in, and then maybe you can go on to win the Listeners League and join our little Premier League that we like to hype up so much. And also, just to say thank you to my guest co-host this week, Gary Morris. You can catch him on his own podcast, The Fourth Official, which I believe, Gary, can be found on all the podcasting platforms that I just mentioned.
Ones, YouTube, Patreon, Spotify. If you search for them, you will find us. You'll get me at GazPop81 if you are interested in all of my musings. But no, it's been a pleasure. Fun, always enjoyable.
There you go. If you want a good football podcast, go follow The Fourth Official. Give Gary some follows there. But all that remains to say is, I've been David Hockney. This has been The Wrestling Draft, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Sports Social Podcast Network, the biggest voices in sport. Let's take a look at some of the lineup. The England pod.
If he plays regular minutes this season for Manchester City, he will re-emerge as one of the best players that we've got.
The final word.
Sure, whether stress fractures were a thing in the mid-70s in the same way that nobody ate avocados until 2005.
Let's be having you.
I love the fact that he's chosen that moment to go, do you know what? Now I'm going to do it.
All on Europe's biggest sport podcast network. Find your next favourite sport podcast. Search Sports Social Podcast Network and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Sports Social Podcast Network.
Verified comparison at content.sport-social.co.uk/comparison.